employed or start your own business? Okay, not many. Okay, raise your hand if you think you're going to sort of management or if you're going to a company or a job. Alright, fantastic. So, I'm sure you've covered it before, but raise your hand if you've ever thought of the difference between management and leadership. Okay, quite a few. Okay, so I'm hoping by the end of my 30-40 minutes with you, I'm just going to share my views on my experience of leadership, where I've come from with that, and how that has impacted and changed my whole life. So, for the most part, I went into business at about 11 years old, into a family business. Looking back, it's probably a little bit more like slave trade, really, for my father, because I got paid £1 a day, and he got a lot of return out of me for that. But as the years went on, I managed to stave off till I got to about, I left college. I did advanced computing at college, then I went into the family business for about 3 years. During that time, we doubled it, we got to about $500,000 in size, and then I left to go travelling. And I went travelling for about 3 years, working as I went along. I didn't really take much money. I spent about £3,000 over the course of 3 years. And during that time, I pretty much denounced business, corporations, commercial entities, money, everything that probably epitomises what it is to be in business or in management. And I got a phone call one day to say that our family was in trouble and our business was in trouble. And overnight I flew back to the UK and I became CEO of Bellet Security Group, which is a predominantly Northwest but now UK-based security company. Looking back, that was a lot of trauma on my life, because the last thing I wanted to be was an MD of any company. I was quite happy on a hammock with a beer in any country, really. Didn't need a beach necessarily. And it took me about 10 years to learn about authenticity and the perception and the difference between truth and perception. And what I learned was that you're all you. Every single one of you. And if you try and be somebody else, eventually those cracks will show through. Now I'm curious, just before I go any further, you will have heard of some of these companies, but raise your hand if you would be happy to work for or within Apple. Okay, raise your hand if it was in Google. More, okay. And I just want to know, would anybody not work for Nestle or Monsanto? A couple of hands. Does anyone want to shout out why they wouldn't? How many? Okay, it's a bit of a shy one, fair enough. But Monsanto and Nestle have got some questionable, from my perspective and my opinion, ethics. And the reason I talk about authenticity is because in leadership, your company, your team, whatever it is a mirror reflection of you. And so the reason some of you want to go and work for Google is because you like Google, for whatever reason that might be. You look at them and say, I like that. I'd like to be in that establishment, I'd like to do more of that. And it works the other way. If you see a form of leadership or a form of business and you don't like it, well, you wouldn't want to work for it. And so authenticity taught me a lot about being me. I can only be me, I can only lead a company the way I know how to lead a company. And for a long time, I tried to lead a company a bit like my dad, because my dad's company to begin with. Or you lead a company like you've read in the textbooks, or you lead a company like your friend says to lead a company. And what I learned was that self-energy, which is also sovereign energy, is the person you are when you're your truest you. It's not the person that your friend says you should be. It's not when you do an action because someone says you should do it. It's the you that's the ultimate you. And so I put this in because sometimes what you do and why others perceive you've done it can be very, very different. And it's a constant battle in leadership. So one of the things I wanted you to get to think about is whatever you're going into, who are you and what sort of company would you be in? And if you had a team, how would you lead them according to yourself? So they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I got taught a long time ago by a good friend of mine. He said, you write a list of opposites. Big, small, fat, thin, hot, cold, black, white, all these words. Neither of them are positive nor negative, they're just words. And he said, hold your hand over one half of the list and what have you got left? You've just got a list of words. It's only when you have both sets of words that you have polar opposites. You've got some comparables. you wouldn't understand hot if you didn't understand cold. And so he said, I'll go out there, and he said, I'll go to a 4-year-old child, and I'll say, in one hand, I have a double chocolate chip cookie, and in the other hand, I have ultimate peace of mind. And he said, which one will the 4-year-old child pick? So raise your hand if you think you picked the cookie. And who'd pick the ultimate peace of mind for the 4-year-old? Probably, if you're wise. So the child picks the cookie because the child understands what it's like to not have a cookie. But he doesn't understand what ultimate peace of mind is. Now I'm going to assume most of you are all sort of like 20 to 30, but you ask any person 30, 40, 50 years old, would they pick the cookie or would they pick ultimate peace of mind? Pick ultimate peace of mind every day, because they understand what disturbance of mind is. And it's without this duality, it's without understanding that we have context or something. And so what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, in my opinion, is a little bit about that. It's about resilience. I was in a boardroom meeting once with everyone in the whole company, and we were doing something which we're going to move on to called the Code of Honour. And I got everyone to think about their lives 5 years from now. What would you like to be doing? Because if you don't know what you want to do in 5 years' time, don't be surprised if in 5 years you wake up and you're unhappy. I think there's a saying out of Alice in Wonderland. Alice asks the cat, which way should I go? And the cat says, well, where do you want to go? And Alice says, I don't know. And the cat says, well, any path will do then. So I asked everyone to share where they want to be in 5 years' time, and Mark stood up. And he said, in 5 years' time, I want to be made redundant and I don't want to be here anymore. I was in our big meeting with everybody there. I just want you to think for a second, what would you have done? Now, to give a bit of a background, this was a person who was unhappy for a while, been with the company for a long time, and people were well aware of his feelings, but just because someone feels something doesn't mean they're going to act on it. And there was an awkward silence for a minute, obviously, and I got everyone to give him a round of applause, because it takes balls to do what he did, especially when, for 5, 6, 7 years, he'd been feeling the way that he'd been feeling. And back then, I didn't have the courage or the rose-tinted glasses removed from my face to realise what was staring in front of me and that I should have done something about it. So he actually did me a favour. And over the course of the next year, we talked and we worked through stuff and we helped him move on to something else that he was happier to do. The reality is the company was changing and he didn't want to be part of that change, but I couldn't see that back then. This quote, by the way, is often cited by Aristotle, and it wasn't, it was Will Durant. So I always make a point wherever I share this to let people know that. So, good teams and bad teams. Raise your hand if you believe that there are good teams and there are bad teams. Majority of the room. And raise your hand if you think there aren't. Okay, 1 or 2. So I used to think there was good teams and bad teams. Definition of a team. Anybody want to shout out? Okay.
Group of individuals working together.
Group of individuals working together.
Yeah.
Very cool, very good, yeah. A group of individuals working together towards a common goal that's shared. So by the definition of that being a team, then there is no bad team. You're either a team working together towards a common shared set of goals, or you're just a group of people who happen to be doing similar jobs. And this was a book that I read that really inspired me. And it made me realise the difference between teams and non-teams, rather than good teams and bad teams. And there's a guy that worked for us called Martin. And we had some bad feedback from Martin, one thing led to another, and we had to let him go. And when we let him go, everyone came up to me and went, "Thank you for doing that. Thank you for getting rid of him." And I thought, that's really strange. And he said, he turns up late, he leaves early, he leaves us on the job, he doesn't help us out, and this is everybody telling me this. And you think to yourself, are we not all on the same team? And I said, why didn't you tell me? And they said, oh, no, we can't rat on one of our own. That'd be wrong. I said, so you won't tell me that he's underperforming, but when he's gone, you're really glad that he's gone? Yeah. Well, where's the logic in that? So I took all my team in, and I said, right, we're going to stop.